is that every user needs to be able to get to subscribe resources without needing to understand how the library works. So no need to understand about the proxy, no need to understand about the knowledge base. They just need to be able to search, and the library needs to be able to deliver. So I'll leave you now in the good hands of our speakers. Robert, over to you.
That's great. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. So, yeah, my name is Rob Skaisbrook, and today we're here to have a look at OpenAthens and Lean Library working together. Now, we're going to sort of kick things off with a bit of an introduction to OpenAthens. We'll have a bit of an introduction to Lean Library as well, for those of you that aren't familiar with those products, and then we'll sort of jump into a product demo, and we'll have time towards the end for a Q&A session as well. So do pop your questions into the Q&A chat box, and we've got a good sort of 10-15 minutes to go through those questions later on. Okay, so in terms of OpenAthens, I always like to start with the why. Why does OpenAthens exist? Essentially, OpenAthens is all about removing barriers to knowledge and connecting people to information. How we do that, we're essentially providing a robust and reliable gateway between that subscription-based content and the people that need access to it. And when we talk about the subscription-based content, we're talking about journals, databases, essentially library or research e-resources, anything that sits behind a paywall, essentially. The end users typically are students. They could be medical researchers. They could be people from a research and development department at a corporate business. But wherever there's that function to access subscription-based content, that's the sort of gateway that OpenAthens provides. And what is OpenAthens? It's a single sign-on software that enables people to access that content. When we talk about single sign-on at OpenAthens, we mean a single user ID and password, or username and password, that's input once at the start of that research session. Because I understand that there are lots of different ways of interpreting single sign-on, and to some people it's kind of same sign-on, it's the same credentials in different places. Sometimes it's the same credentials entered more than once. From an OpenAthens perspective, what we think about is single sign-on is a single set of user credentials entered once at the start of your research session, and then from there on out, it's a kind of seamless experience. So at OpenAthens, we do really believe that accessing that subscription-based content should really be as simple, easy, pain-free as possible. We understand that end users are familiar with kind of seamless experiences when they go to access Google, Facebook, Amazon. There's a sort of personalization element there. It's all kind of crafted around that end user, and those experiences are the same. The expectation is that from the user that those experiences are sort of the same in the library when they access that subscription-based content. So we're trying to make it as simple and easy as possible. No having to remember different usernames, passwords, use clunky software. Essentially, it's about providing fast, easy access to the content that you as a library subscribe to. And from a library's perspective, it's all about putting that information in the right hands of those end users, and giving you guys time back so that you can focus on things that really matter, rather than sort of getting down into the detail of managing software and managing configurations. OpenAthens is really there to take a lot of that pain away. So our value, if we get all of that right, OpenAthens is all about providing a service that ends up with happy end users. People access the content. It's pretty simple, simple, seamless, easy, and they can do their research essentially. The time around administering the software and managing those different access rights is reduced with OpenAthens as well. So there should really be minimal administration for the library. And it's based on standards compliant technology. So OpenAthens uses the SAML 2.0 protocol. It's something that is used across the industry. It's sort of the industry standard for web space authentication, and that's what drives the technology that we use. That OpenAthens Federation, if you're familiar with federated authentication, that's the kind of technology that we're built on. And by default, OpenAthens is going to generate statistics and insight. It's going to give the libraries details around how often people are accessing your collections, potentially, where they're coming from, which different departments they're coming from. But at a sort of, as at a most basic level, it's going to tell you who's accessing your resources and how often. And then you can use that data to make better purchasing decisions. You can see that, if there's a small amount of individual users accessing a piece of content quite often, then you can make sort of decisions around whether or not you need a sort of enterprise-wide license. Maybe you need a slightly reduced capacity license, and that's all data that you wouldn't necessarily get from the counter reports that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. OpenAthens is going to tell you who your users are, not necessarily how many times they're accessing that content. And essentially, it's all about leaving the difficult stuff to us. OpenAthens has been around for 25 years next year, and it's evolved and developed with the sort of varying technologies and the different ways that content has been delivered. But we have a kind of team of skilled people that day in, day out, their job is to solve authentication problems and to support the product. So essentially, you don't have to get down into the detail around that. Globally, OpenAthens is about 4,000 organizations, accessing journals, databases, ebooks, but also software as well. If you use an ILS system, or if you use a discovery layer or a virtual learning environment, OpenAthens can connect to those services as well. And our vision really is about being the most user-friendly information access management experience across the world. We work right now with the RA21 and seamless access movement to help shape the future of authentication. Some of the things that that initiative has focused on is the user experience across platform. So that when you access content based on going to the Science Direct platform and then you go to the Progress platform, that experience can be a bit different from an end user perspective. And so with our work with RA21, we're really attempting to make that as streamlined and seamless as possible. Now, we have plenty of partnerships all over the world with various different technologies and different publishers. But really, what brings them all together is that it's all about the end user. From our perspective, we always look at the end user first, and the technology partnerships that we have in place are about us building that integration between OpenAthens and those services. As OpenAthens is that sort of gateway that sits in the middle, we're sort of agnostic over the technology and the services that are being used. Our role is to connect those end users with that content as easy as possible. And Lean Library in that example is a company that we started working with about a year or so ago. We found that their technology was very complementary to OpenAthens. They sit sort of hand in hand, and we'll see during the live demo later how that works. But we collaborate together. We share knowledge. We support the technology, and you can rest assured that the two teams, from a technical perspective and from a support perspective, work very closely together to provide the best experience. Okay. So over to Johan, and if you have any other questions around OpenAthens, contact@openathens.net is the place to go.
All right, thanks a lot, Rob. And I'll start my presentation. Let's see if this works. I think it does, doesn't it?
Not yet.
Not yet. Then it should now, doesn't it? Yes, here we are. Excellent. Okay. Yeah, so as Michelle said, my name is Johan Tilstra. I'm the founder of Lean Library, and I did work at Utrecht University Library. That's where my library career actually got started. And Lean Library is simply a browser extension that puts library services into the user's workflow. What I'll do in the next few minutes is just talk a little bit about how Lean Library got started and what we're doing, and showing you how we integrate with OpenAthens. And Lean Library actually got started when I started working at Utrecht University Library, and as a librarian, but not by profession, not by education, I had to really dive in. I had to figure out what this was all about, and had a lot of conversations with end users, and just read up on the current state of affairs in library world. And one of the things that we found out is that, as you're probably all aware of right now, is that the library is not the default starting point anymore for end users. More and more what we saw at Utrecht University Library is patrons diving into databases without going via the library, not starting either at the physical building or at the website anymore. And you all know, of course, that a lot of times people were told you need to start at the library because that's where you get access because of IP-based authentication, or because you'll find the EasyProxy links over there. But end users aren't doing that anymore. And we can have a long time discussing why that is. I think it's simply because of convenience. People will just click a link to an article and land on a publisher's domain, not having gone through the library. But the fact that they're not starting out at the library does cause quite a few issues for them, and more than just simply getting access to a PDF. Imagine, for instance, if you are an end user and you open up this really nice article on Science Direct. The first question you have to ask yourself is, can I access this content? Is this content on Science Direct accessible to me? How do I find out? And the second question will usually be, what authentication method should I use? Should I use OpenAthens or Shibboleth or EasyProxy, maybe the VPN? Do I need to get on my bike to get to the library to actually get access? Some people do, honestly. I've had people tell me that. And one of the other things is that if you land on an article like this, there's no library presence. There's no indication that you should go through the library or that the library is reachable directly for you to ask those questions. And again, this might be totally obvious to us librarians, but for end users, these are true issues. Or imagine this page, Stellar & Francis, as an end user, you've actually decided that you want to log in. You're going to try it. There's a login button, you've clicked it, and this is the page that you end up with. And yeah, a few different methods, username, credentials, Shibboleth, OpenAthens. Which of the methods are you going to use? And is it going to be useful because it's just a domain somewhere? Will your library have a license for this domain, or is it all in vain and you won't get access anyway? And imagine that you need to use EasyProxy. That's not even an option on this screen, and that might be the way to go. Or this page on Ingenta Connect, really nice article, just $47 for, hopefully to get it for keeps, but maybe for just an hour or 48 hours. At the same time, this article could be available at an aggregator at a completely different domain. And again, as a patron, how are you supposed to know? I know that when I ran into this situation for the first time when I started working at Utrecht University Library, I was just really amazed. The fact that one article can be available on separate domains, and it might be licensed on domain A, whereas it's not licensed on the other domain. I mean, how are you supposed to know that it's even possible? And obviously, of course, if you're in need of this article, quite often a patron, or maybe not a student, they'll find other ways, but researchers might just pay for an article that's already licensed by their own library simply because they don't know and they didn't start out at the library. Or imagine going to Google Scholar. You'll find a nice few articles about dinosaurs, and you don't see those nice full text links. Why don't you see those? And how are you supposed to know whether an article is licensed by your library? And we all know, of course, that you need to configure Google Scholar for to get those full text links to show up, but a patron might not know that. So again, not starting out at the library might cause quite a few issues. And there's more, of course. So for instance, if you go to PubMed, or what if you land on a resource that requires a username and password? How are you supposed to know that that's what you need to use? Or resources that are only accessible on campus? A whole slew range of issues that end users, patrons might run into, simply because they don't start at the library anymore. And when I saw all of that, I had a bit of a brainwave. I thought, well, can't we simply build a browser extension? I mean, it's really powerful technology. Can't we just get a lot of those library services into the user's workflow so that as an end user, you don't have to think about going to the library. We can just go about your ways, and at specific times the library will pop up in your browser. Can't we just help navigate that complicated and sometimes confusing library infrastructure? And before we started building something, we had a few considerations. First, technology, all right? Can we actually build this? I mean, it's nice to have a nice vision, but is it actually doable? And the second question was, if we build this, will people actually start using it? I mean, I could envision loads and loads of people using it, and I could envision something like that being really useful, but it wasn't proven yet. And a third, maybe the most important consideration of this page, privacy. I mean, browser extensions, they can see everything that happens in the browser. Will people trust us? Will people trust the library with doing the right thing and not snooping on any user behavior and only acting when it's useful? So what we did is we started building just a very small prototype, handed it out just to get that feedback to get these questions answered. And in this screen, I'm going to show you the browser extension that more or less looks like what we ended up with at Utrecht University Library. And what I'm going to do is, when I show you a screen like this, I'm just going to narrate you through the things that you're going to see. What you're going to see right now is me just typing in jstor.org, opening up jstor.org without going through the library, and you'll see that I'll automatically get redirected through the proxy server. Here we go, jstor.org. The browser extension recognizes the domain, knows it can be opened through the proxy, and will take me through the library's proxy automatically. And I land on a proxied JSTOR. I've got access to everything that's licensed on JSTOR by the library that I'm using, and I'm using the Dutch National Library over here, Koninklijke Bibliotheek in Dutch, and up pops a small notification informing me about what just happened. I've been taken through my library's proxy. I've got access to everything that's licensed on JSTOR by my library. And on top of that, there's a small notification, a small link on the bottom of the pop-up with a link back to the library that allows me to get in touch with the library real quick. And obviously, right now, what you're going to see, what you're seeing right now is library being present in my workflow, whereas it wasn't present before. And this small prototype allowed us to test those presumptions, test to see if this was actually something useful or whether it was just a wild vision and we shouldn't pursue it any further. Well, it turned out that in the end, at Utrecht University, we had thousands and thousands of users. And this is a quote that we got back from one of those users. It improves my search for articles 1,000 times. You have taken away a most hated hurdle in my life. And I think it's kind of funny that this is seen as a most hated hurdle in his or her life. But it does speak to the appreciation of this tiny first prototype. So yeah, in the end, we did prove that we can build it. Patrons will install it. We did find that privacy and security are really important. People will think about whether they are going to install such a browser extension. But absolutely delighted feedback from those end users. And all of that positive feedback and seeing that it was so very useful drove me to found Lean Library. And with Lean Library, I wanted to make sure that the software that we build would become available to a much broader range of end users, not just the students and researchers at Utrecht University Library. I just wanted to make sure that this small tool could be available to as many users out there in as many libraries that are also using a similar infrastructure. And we're doing a lot more right now than just helping people get access through the proxy. Obviously, we're working with OpenAthens, not just EasyProxy anymore, because we saw that more and more libraries were starting to use OpenAthens, migrating away from EasyProxy onto OpenAthens. And yeah, we thought about the issues that we were solving for users going through proxies, and we found that some of those issues might be a little bit similar for OpenAthens users as well. The question, do I need to go through my library? Will my library have a license to this database. Which authentication method should I use? Should I use OpenAthens on this resource? And that's how we got in touch with the OpenAthens team, as Rob said, about a year ago, and decided to build support for OpenAthens into Lean Library, not just to help libraries who make a drastic switch away from EasyProxy to OpenAthens just all at once, but also to help librarians who move away in a gradual manner, who might have some resources on EasyProxy and some other resources on OpenAthens. And yeah, the technology that we found out is quite different, obviously. SAML versus a rewriting proxy server, but the user journey is quite comparable. And in these upcoming slides, I'll take you through that user journey. And again, with all of these browser windows, I'll talk you through what you're going to see, because the screens flash by quite fast. I know what you're going to see, but I want to make sure that you'll know and that you'll understand as well. And before we can really dive in and start using Lean Library together with OpenAthens, we need to have the browser extension installed, obviously. What I'll show is how the installation process works. I'll enter some of, just a little bit of information about myself, and the only information I'll enter is the affiliation, the library that I'm going to use. I'm going to use NHS Mercy Care. They've been super nice in allowing us to use their OpenAthens account, their Lean Library account. So that's what you're going to see me use. And in the end, you'll see a small tutorial pop up that explains how Lean Library works. Here we go. Clicking the download button, taking me to the Chrome store because I'm using Chrome for this demo. Here I need to select my affiliation. And here the short tutorial pops up, allowing me to learn a little bit more about Lean Library, about the browser extension that I've just installed. And I hope you've seen that it's actually very few steps. It's really easy to get Lean Library installed. It's not a hard thing to do. We sometimes hear librarians wondering whether end users will actually install this such a plugin. Yeah, we found that they will. It's something that just helps them. To them, it's free. There's no drawbacks. They're not paying with their user data. Privacy is secured. So yeah, it's just a small price to pay to get all the convenience of Lean Library into your browser. And now that we've got the browser extension installed, I'm going to show you in the next screen what happens when I open Science Direct. And again, I'm not going to open Science Direct by going through the library. I'll just type in sciencedirect.com directly. What you'll see is Lean Library kicking in, recognizing Science Direct as a domain that can be and should be opened through OpenAthens. And you'll see that that process works almost seamlessly. A new tab, Science Direct, and Lean Library automatically redirects me through the NHS portal. And here I am, I land on Science Direct, authenticated through OpenAthens. And if you followed, again, I warned you a little bit in advance, the screens flash by quite fast. But the only thing I did is click once. I clicked once when LastPass, the password manager, filled in my credentials into the OpenAthens authentication screen. I had to click once to actually get authenticated, and that's it. I didn't have to know whether sciencedirect.com was a domain that could be or should be opened through OpenAthens. I didn't have to choose between entering a username and password or choosing Shibboleth or EasyProxy. Lean Library took all of those choices out of my hands. Now we're authenticated on sciencedirect.com. I'll show you what happens when I open up a completely unrelated other publisher domain. I'm going to open up an article over here. And what we'll see is that I'll automatically get authenticated on Taylor & Francis, but the article itself isn't licensed by NHS Mercy Care on Taylor & Francis. And what you'll see over here is another feature of Lean Library where we'll do an automated check against the knowledge base. We'll check whether the article itself is licensed. And if it isn't, we'll try to help the end user and point them to a different route to the article, to the full text itself. So a new tab, a link to an article on Taylor and Francis, automatically redirected. I don't have to do anything. I'm already authenticated, so I don't have to enter my credentials again. And I'll automatically land on this authenticated page with the article. And here, Lean Library did a check in the background against the knowledge base and determined that the article itself isn't licensed. And here's a feature to simply request a document delivery of this article. And if I were to push that button, that request article button, what would happen is I would land on the NHS Mercy Care document delivery system. All the metadata of the article would have been filled out, and it would be really easy for me to request a copy of this article. And again, I hope you see that the library is really present in my workflow right now, visible in a very positive manner, helping me out with getting access to this specific article. And there are more ways on how we try to point the end user to alternative versions of articles. For instance, I'll show you another article on Taylor and Francis. Different article, again, authenticated seamlessly. What you see here right now is that the article itself is not licensed, but there's an open access copy to be found. And we're using the unpayable API for this and pointing the end user to that open access copy. Again, library in your workflow trying to be useful if an article isn't accessible right away. And just to show you one more time, I'll open up another domain, again, a totally unrelated domain. And what you'll see happening again is that I'm being authenticated through OpenAthens in a seamless manner again. Another tab, jamanetwork.com is the domain that I'm using right now. Lean Library recognizes the domain, automatically redirects. And here I land on JAMA Network with a nice notification again from NHS Mercy Care telling me what just happened and indicating me that I right now have access to all the licensed content on this platform. So I hope with these very brief videos that you've seen how we've managed to even simplify the user journey a little bit more, make it really easy for the end user to get authenticated, and taking away the need for the end user to know about how knowledge bases work, which domains can be opened, which domains might contain licensed materials by the library, just taking away all of those considerations and just trying to automate as many steps as possible for the end user, while at the same time providing a very positive presence for the library in the user's workflow. And what you're seeing over here is the backend behind Lean Library. We need a bit of information, obviously, on making all of this work. Here's a list of domains that are all entered into the Lean Library dashboard. And all of these domains contain licensed materials by NHS Mercy Care in this instance. And all of these domains, if you land on any one of those, you'll automatically get authenticated through OpenAthens. What's also noteworthy over here is that to make Lean Library work with OpenAthens, there are no changes needed on the OpenAthens side. We'll just need a few parameters about the entity ID and I think the OpenAthens scope, and that's about it. And again, what you could do with it might not be very obvious, but what you could do in this dashboard is for any single domain, you can select whether it should be automatically opened through an EasyProxy server or through OpenAthens. And that allows libraries to have a really smooth migration path away from EasyProxy onto OpenAthens. For any single resource, you can set it up in OpenAthens, switch end users over from EasyProxy onto OpenAthens, For end users, not much will change. One day, they're automatically being redirected through EasyProxy. The next day, they're automatically redirected through OpenAthens. And that takes away the need for the library, for you, to have a huge communication campaign about different methods, different manners on how to get authenticated on all of these resources. And finally, just a very, very brief peek at what we do with statistics. We inform the librarians about the uptake of the browser extension, how many people have been using it, how many redirects have happened, which browsers have been using, but we don't know a lot more about the end user. We don't know usernames, email addresses, passwords. We don't know who the end user is, and that's really really. Yeah, the reason for that's really simple. Our business model is not about user data monetization. We don't do anything with that. Lean Library is all about building a tool primarily for end users, and close second, of course, for librarians, so that those librarians can help those end users with navigating that library infrastructure. Lean Library is subscription-based with a small setup fee, and that's about it. And pricing is based on chosen features, current infrastructure of the library, and FTE sizes. But we would all welcome you to get in touch with us, of course, to hear more about the other features. And that brings me to my last slide and Q&A section. And of course, please do get in touch with us, any of us, if you have any more questions.
Well, thank you, Robert. Thank you, Johan. Going to try to read out all these questions here. We got quite a few going on, so we'll start with the first one. How does OpenAthens differentiate itself from EasyProxy? I think that's for you, Rob.
Sure. Okay. So from a sort of a basic standpoint, the technology that OpenAthens uses is different from EasyProxy. So EasyProxy is all based around IP addresses. It's a proxy server. It's all about sending the IP address to the publisher, and that's what sort of denotes you as a subscriber. OpenAthens takes a step on from that. It uses the SAML technology, which is sort of purpose-built for authentication. It's down at the individual user level. So we're not just sending an IP address, we're sending other credentials of information. It's individual user logins, essentially. So the sort of technology is different. OpenAthens is on this sort of SAML technology, which is, kind of purpose-built for authentication, whereas IPs were sort of, I guess, adopted by the library as content started to be delivered online. So we would consider sort of SAML a step on in terms of the technology. It's more secure, more extensible, kind of purpose-built. From a practical perspective, OpenAthens is always hosted, so it's delivered as a software as a service product. So you don't need to install anything, you don't need to manage anything on your network. You don't really need to sort of, have IT sort of managing certificates, that kind of thing. And the big differentiator, certainly for a lot of libraries that librarians that I speak to, is that the management of a configuration file, which is a lot of the work when you're sort of using EasyProxy, essentially just doesn't exist with OpenAthens. So, we talk to a lot of libraries who have, one FTE, and their role is pretty much just to manage that configuration file. When a publisher makes a change, you have to make a change to your configuration file. Next publisher makes a change, you have to do the same thing. The OpenAthens technology is based around that federation approach. So if there's a change that needs to be made, we can make that centrally, and that sort of populates out to everybody. So it's a more kind of sustainable way of doing things, and it certainly doesn't require the level of administration that EasyProxy does. And the big differentiator from a kind of a sort of ongoing perspective is that OpenAthens has a kind of statistics and insights module built into the product. So that kind of reporting on who's accessing resources, how often, that kind of thing is really easily accessible in a sort of web user interface. So it's a nice sort of user interface that you just log into via a browser. That differentiates it from EasyProxy, and that EasyProxy has a sort of, a file of logs essentially that you need to kind of decode and post-process to try and make sense of. OpenAthens has this kind of nice shiny user statistics reporting module that's kind of out of the box essentially. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question. There are a few other differences as well, but I don't want to take up all the time.
Thank you, Rob. I'm sure you'll get in touch with her after. And now this question is from Ashley Road. How long would it take to implement the Lean Library extension for a new library?
That's a question for me, I'd say.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good question. The technical setup to make Lean Library work is really simple. Sometimes jokingly we tell librarians that we could set it up in a few hours, and actually we can set it up in less than a few hours, and it will work, and you're good to go. In practice, what we see is that most of the time taken up by librarians in implementing Lean Library is not the technical side, but more the communication side. Having a nice page on the website, pointing people to the download page on Lean Library, setting up a communication campaign, tweeting about it, informing colleagues about the fact that Lean Library will be available, making sure that they know what it is and know to point people to where they can get it. So usually just a few weeks and then you're good to go. But again, technically, a few hours if you get the right people in a session together.
Thanks, Johan. Next question, I think, is also for you. What browsers are supported? From Stephen Iyer.
Yeah, so browsers, obviously a very good question. We support all modern browsers. What have you? Chrome, Firefox, Opera, Microsoft Edge. We even have a very old version of, no, not an old version, but we try to keep up with Internet Explorer, which I wouldn't call a modern browser at all, obviously, but we still have a few librarians asking us for support. But please don't ask us about that version, because Internet Explorer is such a horrible browser. But yeah, you can see about from the range of browsers that we support, it really fits our mission. We try to help as many patrons with as possible with as many library issues or library convenience issues that they might have. So supporting as many browsers as possible is just obvious for us.
Thank you, Johan. Next question, Maria Contreras. I joined a bit late. What time will the next presentation start? Well, we will send you the recording after this, so no worries. You won't miss anything.
Or get in contact, get in touch with us
Yes.
if you've missed anything, obviously.
Yes, yeah, no problem with that one. And this one's from Tracy Harmon. We have some concerns that this will increase use and therefore cost our journal and database subscriptions, and therefore for cost, I believe.
Yep.
Do you have any experience on how libraries mitigate this and keep our collection costs sustainable?
Oh, that's a really tough question, of course, but because it hits at a fundamental point of librarians. Yes, it will increase your usage. People will find it easier to get access to stuff, and they will start using that stuff more and more. That's what we see all around with all of our customers. And I think it's a very difficult question, because on the one hand, that's what you'd want as a librarian. You want people to make use of the stuff that you've licensed. On the other hand, yes, if you're not careful, you're going to run into higher costs. So I think this it's like a luxury problem to have. Would be excellent if usage of your materials increases, but on the other hand, that will require some very tough negotiating with publishers, I'd say. But on the other hand, I mean, I think I'll have to relay this question to our customers ourselves and hear what they how they've mitigated these issues. I don't have a clear-cut answer to this question right now.
I think from my experience, they're just happy that their resources are being used. To be honest.
Yeah. So,
but that's a first world. It's really a really tough question there, Tracy.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. Our customers are just happy with the uptake and the increase of library visibility and the increased contact that the librarians are having with our end users. That's what we see. Yeah.
Thank you, Tracy. All right, next question, Heather Devonzo. Am I correct in thinking the Lean Library extension will follow users' Chrome account wherever they go?
I think if I understand the question correctly, I think this is a question about whether if you've signed into Chrome and you start using Chrome on a different laptop where you sign in with the same account, then yes, Chrome synchronizes all of the installed browser extensions, and Lean Library is just a browser extension, so that will happen as well. I think this is something particular to Chrome. Firefox has a similar feature, but as the question is about Chrome, yeah, I think that will happen. And it's no longer an option. It used to be an option to not sign into Chrome, but that's no longer an issue. That's no longer an option. So when you use Chrome, you'll automatically get authenticated with your Google account. And if you start using Chrome on your laptop afterwards, then Lean Library will appear on there as well. I think so, yeah.
Thanks, Johan. Next question, I believe, is for Rob. Can you use both EasyProxy and OpenAthens, or well, that's for you, Johan, also, I think. Anna, correct me if I'm wrong. Can you use both EasyProxy and OpenAthens, or can you use only one or the other?
Oh, you can absolutely use both at the same time. I mean, we've got loads of customers, loads of libraries using EasyProxy for a few domains and some other domains on OpenAthens, and then maybe some other domains where you need to use a username and password, and then another one that you for which you need to be on campus because licensing states that you can only access that resource when you're physically on campus. So you can use them yeah, side by side. The issue with that, of course, is that if you're an end user, there's no indication for any specific domain which method to use. So at Utrecht University Library, we had 700 databases on the A to Z list, and nobody knows for all of those what authentication method to use. And on top of that, it might change. The library might be working on a migration away from EasyProxy onto OpenAthens. So one day, Science Direct might be on the proxy and you need to go through the proxy. The other day, it might be on OpenAthens and you need to go through OpenAthens. And again, if you're not starting out at the library, how are you supposed to know? And that's exactly the issue that the library is trying to solve.
And I would say from an OpenAthens, from an authentication perspective, I mean, if you're trying to decide whether you should be using both EasyProxy and OpenAthens or whether you want to use one or the other, I mean, when people move from one to the other, when they move from EasyProxy and sort of upgrade to OpenAthens, they do run the two systems in parallel for a period of time. The reason being, you know, that authentication is kind of mission critical. You know, we always need to be able to authenticate to resources, and so we run the two together for a period of time, generally about sort of 6 months or so. But essentially, you know, OpenAthens will cover access to pretty much all of the resources that EasyProxy will. You know, not all of the kind of subscription content and vendors out there support that SAM or federated access yet. You know, there's a sort of longer tail of people that only support IP-based authentication. OpenAthens can act as a proxy as well. It's kind of embedded, it's kind of hidden behind the scenes, and you know, the end users won't know whether OpenAthens is doing SAM or sort of IP proxying. So yeah, essentially we see that sort of transition period where you would run both, but you know, give it 6 months or so, and most people are sort of switching off their proxy and have migrated everything across to OpenAthens.
Thanks, Rob, for that. And of course, you know, the beauty of it is that you don't, with this extension, the end user doesn't need to have any user education at all. They just simply search and get to the results that they want. Okay, next question. OpenAthens, Rob. You mentioned RA21. How does OpenAthens fit with GetFTR?
Good question. So yeah, GetFTR, if you haven't, any of you read about it, do have a look. It's a sort of new initiative that was announced last week. So the answer is that GetFTR is compatible with the seamless access button. So the blue button that's going to be sort of all over the place on all of the vendors' websites, which was the sort of, you know, the culmination of the RA21 pilots and trying to improve that user user journey when you go directly to the publisher's websites. So the RA21 blue button or the seamless access blue button is driven by SAML-based authentication. OpenAthens is a SAML-based authentication tool. So the answer is it will work with it just fine. It's based on the same technology, and you'll be able to authenticate as you would any other way.
All right, thanks. So hopefully that answers your question, Chad. Ken Chat has another question. Johan, can you differentiate Lean Library from solutions like Cuponio and Browsing LibKey?
Yeah, that's another good question. First off, of course, I would advise people to just look carefully at Cuponio and LibKey themselves, because everything I think I know a lot about them, but I'm not the authoritative source on information about those alternatives. But that having said, I think Cuponio is a bit different than Lean Library. It's got a freemium model, and it's got yeah, a few other features where we really try to focus and yeah, we focus on librarians and librarians helping library users. Cuponio is freemium and doesn't work with librarians themselves. Maybe they've changed that, but that's what I've seen. Browsing LibKey is they try to do a few things similar to what Lean Library does. Also try to point people to alternative versions in some occasions, but they don't have the feature of automatically getting authenticated on domain basis. They don't have those nice pop-up messages that you can configure as an end user, as a librarian, and show them on different domains. There are quite a few other features that Lean Library has that I haven't seen in LibKey, or I haven't seen in LibKey yet, maybe. So again, yeah, take a look at what they're doing and make up your own mind. That's what my personal advice would be.
All right, thanks, Ken. Thanks, Johan. Heather Davanzo has another question. Do you work with most publishers? What are your plans with publishers? And I'm not sure, Heather, which is this for OpenAthens or is this for Lean Library?
I can provide an OpenAthens answer.
Yes, I think, yeah.
He's asking for Lean Library. No, go for it, Johan.
All right, yeah, go for
okay.
it. Yeah, with most publishers, well, what we try to do is we try to be publisher agnostic, and we still are. So for us, it really doesn't matter where an article appears on the web. It could even appear on Facebook, for instance. We determine that the end user is looking at an article on Facebook or on any other platform, and we'll try to do our magic. We'll try to see whether it's licensed by the library and whether we can point them to a licensed copy somewhere else or an open access copy, or whether we need to tell them it's available, but you'll have to go through interlibrary loan or through document delivery system. So we're fully publisher agnostic. What are our plans with publishers? Well, yeah, that's a tough question. I don't think we really have plans with publishers. We're just planning to make sure that we keep working across publishers and yeah, have the library visible on those publishers platforms and have those library services available on those platforms. And actually with GetFTR in place, that might be a little bit of friction over there, where with GetFTR a publisher might not point an end user to a copy of an article available on an aggregator, whereas Lean Library will. So there's a thing that kind of points to our plans with publishers. Just get those library services across all of those platforms.
I think that also answers Emily Kellavang's question. How is Lean Library similar and different than the GetFTR initiative? Emily, if it doesn't, please let us know in the chat. If it does, then I'm just going to move on to another question from Anna. How does OpenAthens differ from Shibboleth?
Yeah, good question. So Shibboleth uses the same SAML protocol. So at its heart, it's using the same technology essentially. But Shibboleth is open source. So the major difference is OpenAthens is off the shelf and supported, managed, hosted, software as a service. Shibboleth is kind of you download the code and you kind of go for it yourself essentially. So so you need IT help generally. You need infrastructure. You need to update your certificates. You need to manage it, support it in-house generally. And one of the big differences is that Shibboleth doesn't provide reporting natively. It has logs in there, and you can kind of configure various components and build sort of reporting modules, but OpenAthens kind of does that out of the box. So it's the kind of classic buy versus build debate, essentially. OpenAthens is your off-the-shelf. You buy a product, it has a support network, and it essentially just works. And Shibboleth is, if you have the resource and time and effort to install and manage it, then you do that. Although typically we find that even universities or organizations that have done Shibboleth, the people that manage that don't necessarily document it, and attrition happens over time. So it can become a bit of a conundrum, even if you do have people to manage Shibboleth in-house.
Thank you, Anna. Next question from Heather again. Heather, you're our biggest fan. We love you. Is it true that Lean Library works with ebooks as well as e-journals?
It's true. It does. So the same thing that we do with articles, try to see if the article is available, get in touch with the library systems to establish where there's an accessible copy. That's what we do with ebooks as well. And that's just a really nice user experience where when you're looking to buy an ebook on Amazon, for instance, and here pops up Lean Library informing you that the exact same ebook is available for free through your library, something that you might not even have thought about trying to figure out yourself. It just proactively pops up and saves you just a bit of money.
Thank you. And from Gwen Pond, is Lean Library used more in public libraries or academic libraries?
Ah, that's a good question as well. Right now, it's used more in academic libraries than in public libraries, specifically because there's a bigger need for getting access to scholarly materials in academic libraries, of course. On the other hand, we do see Lean Library being used in corporates as well, pharmaceutical companies where there's a big group of highly paid researchers who also need access to articles, governments where there's a need to get access to articles like these, and I could even imagine Lean Library together with OpenAthens being used in other sectors, because as Rob said, OpenAthens also used for more than just getting access, just getting authenticated on scholarly platforms. Other types of software can also be connected with OpenAthens.
Right, thank you. Rebecca Tatterson, that's for Rob, I believe. Are there vendors that host OpenAthens other than EBSCO?
Yeah, so just to clarify, EBSCO doesn't actually host OpenAthens. OpenAthens is hosted by Google. Google is our sort of cloud partner, so the product itself is kind of developed and hosted by hosted by Google, developed by OpenAthens, which is part of JISC in the UK. So EBSCO is a partner essentially. EBSCO, you can buy OpenAthens from EBSCO, and EBSCO will support OpenAthens for you. We generally we see sites that that buy other EBSCO products. If you've got Discovery, if you've got Full Text Finder, if you've got other EBSCO products, it kind of makes sense to add OpenAthens into the mix. You have the same support contacts, the same people that you're familiar with, the same account managers, and that's where sort of EBSCO comes in. But we do have a sort of global network of partners. If you have a look at the openathens.org website, you will see all of our partners listed there.
Well, thank you. And it looks like we've answered all of the questions. So that's it, unless, should I count down from 10 to see if you guys are thinking about any other questions? So I'm going to count down silently. Well, if there's not any other questions, or if you're too shy, or if you want to know more, please, the email addresses are on the screen right in front of you. Do contact us, contact Rob, Johan, myself. We will be able to show you even more about what OpenAthens is and Lean Library and how we can work together seamlessly. Well, thank you for joining our webinar today, and feel free to contact us. So we will look forward to speaking with all of you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.